Welcome everyone to the Pantheon of M. I am your co-host Ray.
And I'm Evie.
And today we're looking at Cloak and Dagger. This is part 1 of part 2 because it's such a longer, it's a 10-part series really,
Yeah.
right? But like we're going to break it up a little bit just to give you more emphasis on the shows.
Right.
In this one. Well, the scene of this movie takes place in the town of New Orleans, right?
Definitely.
The series, the actual comic series, it was in New York.
Yeah.
It's based on the Spider-Man comic back in March of '82.
I actually have that.
Do you really?
Yeah.
Oh wow! Because it's probably, I don't know how much it's worth. I'm sure it's worth a lot of money.
I don't know. Like I've either the first. Yeah, I have at least one.
I have the 4-part miniseries which came out in the '90s, and I don't know how much it's worth now. I'm hoping it has money, it has value. Not that I'm ever going to sell it, but I just want to have it.
Right. Yeah. For sure.
Okay. Well, anyways, going back to the show. Sorry, we went on a tangent here. Cloak and Dagger takes place in New Orleans. It's post Hurricane Katrina, actually.
Yeah.
So this is a time where it makes some sense because you want to have a more current feel and more relevance to the story of poverty and the times, right? And this is what the show really is. So your protagonist is, their names are Tandy Bowen and Tyrone Johnson, and it starts off kind of like the origin story. So basically, it's these kids. There's an accident, an oil refinery. It collapses and it releases a energy field, and these kids end up winding up in off the pier. Each has their own story. They are both one stormy, rainy night. There's a car accident with Tandy and her father, Nathan Bowen. It veers off onto a pier. The father passes away in the accident. And with Tyrone, there was an incident being New Orleans. And this is the time where poverty and racial profiling was kind of a big thing. They were trying to bring a stolen piece of property back to its owner, and a police squad car picked them up or saw them, and they kind of went on the run. And then the older brother, Billy, got shot in the process of the explosion as a side effect. There was an unintentional shooting. And so saved his brother who fell over the pier. Mm-hmm. Tyrone went into the water as well. Right. So both Tyrone and Tandy were in the water. And when the oil refinery rig collapsed, it let off a eco-sounding energy field that kind of like hit them, and that's how they got their latent powers, you could call it. And so it takes place now 8 years later because it's about a couple weeks before the 8th anniversary of the incident. Mm-hmm. And they unintentionally or inadvertently meet, and they release their power, or their dormant powers. Mm-hmm. And their powers are quite extraordinary. How would you describe it, actually?
Well, it like formed like a force between them both, mm-hmm. that kind of threw them back, so it kind of touched them and then repelled them backwards. Yeah,
that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I think it's called a psionic blast, or because they have a psionic. I was reading something. They have a psionic link. What psionic means, I have no idea. It sounds cool though. Psionic. Anyways, they have a link, a psychological link, a mystical link, or a psionic link, and also the closer they get, their powers are released. They're triggered.
Yeah, definitely.
But if they touch, you get this huge, humongous backlash, which is really cool, and that plays up near the end of the film, but end of the episodes. And so one is of light, one is of dark. Dagger is light, Cloak is the darkness.
Yeah.
And I think it's because they sort of explain it to you in the visual aspect of the origins, because she was surrounded in light inside the car, and he was in a dark water surrounded by darkness. Right. And so their powers. So what would you say the powers are? Like, if you had to break down, like, what is Dagger's powers?
Dagger, she actually develops like a piece of glass or ice or whatever.
Like daggers.
Yeah, like that, right?
Yeah.
And she uses it like to keep herself safe, and she just stabs people with it.
It's true. It's true. And Cloak is the same way too. He's the darkness. He doesn't stab you with the darkness, though he can absorb you. Eventually, his powers develop so he can absorb people into him, which gets revealed later on. But his power is basically he can teleport.
Exactly.
And what I found unusual about this one, because I didn't understand in the comic books, because maybe I didn't read the comic books all that often, but like whatever he is driven to or will to, he actually pops into that location. Now, initially, he can't control where he's popping into.
No.
And he has to stay in control of himself, so he doesn't drink or do drugs. He's a very clean. One of the things I like about this too, and I'm going to jump off here and there, but like on various tangents, that the characters are very juxtaposed to each other in terms of like how they are in the balance of stuff. These are low tiered superhero kids. Yeah. They're representations of the times of kids, because the result of the incident left Tandy's family broke.
Yeah.
And the mother was on drugs, and was not homeless, but was like even had a drug addiction. She ended up Tandy became homeless herself. She was shacked up. She was hanging out, staying at this abandoned church where she was staying. Yeah. Tyrone, his parents, because they lost the older son,
Billy.
Tyrone was dealing with survivor's guilt. And that was affecting him in school and in his basketball team, just to coping with that. He was seeing Father Delgado, who was helping like deal with that. Yeah. Like the school had their own counseling for them.
Yeah.
And he was going to a Catholic church, and it involves some. We have some slower tier characters. We have Liam, who is the muscle or hired friend of Tandy. So whenever she'd go on, she's the kind of person who's a pickpocket. So she would target the rich boys and steal money from them. Yeah. Because her backstory was, her father was a project manager of Roxxon, and then when the tanker oil rig collapsed, he was blamed for it, and their family was penniless, and they were marked as being outcast because of the event, because the father lost everything, and and she was basically tending to defend for herself. Right. So she became a pickpocket and thief. Tyrone, he became a straight A student, trying to make sure his family was happy, because they kind of pushed him to be better. The mother got herself together. She became a manager at Roxxon, but she's able to afford. I think she was an executive or a manager, but like she was a well-respected person. Try to do right by her kids, and do everything correctly. And the family was actually, the father and the mother were together. They were very well stable, and they tried to be helpful towards Tyrone, and Tyrone was trying to do the right thing. Right. His brother was the same way too, trying to do the right thing. True. Like he tried to always lead by example, and Tyrone knew that. Right. Yeah. So they were reeling from the loss, and as they got closer to the 8th anniversary, you could see the family becoming unravelable, like just stressed out. Right. And the series sort of expressed, the slow build of like, okay, we're getting to that anniversary period of time. Yeah. So little by little, it was taking its toll on the family, and they were questioning themselves. And then so the scene where we get the heroes unite kind of thing was when Tyrone went and they both went to this party in the woods, like a high school party where they were drinking and stuff. Yeah, exactly. And she pickpocketed his wallet, and when he figured it out, he chased her into one of the local cemeteries of New Orleans, because they're known for their mausoleums and cemeteries and the cable carts. And the minute he grabbed her, it created a psionic blast. Exactly. And released their dormant powers. Exactly. It's an interesting tale. So they, again, because of the blast, they didn't understand what was going on with their bodies. Mm-hmm. This is kind of like an adolescent story too. Yeah. Because they were like 8 years later, so they're like 16 years of age. Yeah. So one of the guys that kind of like that Tandy kind of robbed found her and tried to get even, and then out of a reaction, she released her first light dagger and stabbed him. Yeah. And that caused a criminal investigation that brought on Detective Bridget O'Reilly. Yeah. And so she became one of the people the side of the law who was trying to find out what was going on. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, you find there's different shades of gray. Not everyone's a good person. Right. Yeah. And so, and then Tyrone, he was after the cop who shot his brother, because his name is Detective Connor. And then the incident with that version, if I remember correctly, was that he mentioned that it was a guy who shot his brother, and he had a scar on his face, but there was no record of the police officer. Right, right. And when they found his brother in the ocean, in the water, he was full of drugs, they say, which he wasn't the case. He was a very clean cut, just a good, just normal young lad trying to do the right thing. Mm-hmm. And so now 8 years later, they both have a path.
Yeah.
Avoid the cops on Tandy's part, and then Tyrone's part is to avenge his brother, but doing it the right way, finding justice for him.
Yeah.
Then we meet one another side character named Evita. She is a student who has a crush on Tyrone, and and her aunt, who I don't know her name, but it's kind of like a psychic tarot card reading, and she says every so often there's a couple that will help save the city from trauma, and you kind of get like just like a fortune teller type character.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that's really is the first half of the show. You're just developing who are the players in the town, what's this threat, and then you find out certain side characters. Like there's like when the car accident happened, the father was on the phone, so he was kind of like it's kind of his fault that had the car accident, but he was on the phone with Ivan Hess, who was the project manager who had an accident on the oil rig, and we find out that. That Ivan's daughter, Mina Hess, is taking over her father, and she's an environmentalist, so she's trying to work in an oil company, but find alternative versions, renewable sources of energy.
Right. Yeah.
She's trying to put a good face on the oil company of Roxxon.
Yeah.
And Roxxon is predominantly the major character in this series. Overall, I really enjoyed the dynamic of them discovering their powers and the driving forces of them trying to the teenage angst at the time for each character, both having their own stake in it, like because Tandy is poor, they're run down. His family is successful, like they're business savvy, they're members of the community. He's a straight A student, I would imagine, in a prep school, a Catholic school. But they're literally on both sides of the spectrum, both economically as well as just socially.
Sure.
So what were your thoughts of it?
I really like Cloak and Dagger. Yeah, like you have your rich and your poor. So there's like, so there's a lot of room like to play right in the story.
Right.
I really like it.
Yeah, and I like the one that it took me a while to figure out like what it was they were doing is that whenever they touch the person, they have a empathic linked, or they can see somebody's like
they can see
their people and see their visions or their inhibitions, and we find out later on, like in the first few episodes, that what their power is. Tyrone can see their nightmares, and Tandy can see their hopes and dreams.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's really interesting. And then they can use that to their advantage. And it wasn't clear until this series progresses. Do you see how they actually can manipulate those aspects of one's inner thinking, inner workings?
Definitely.
And also you can see the truths. I think, right? You can see, because I know this scene where the mother is trying to get back her fortune, what they lost from the company, and her new love interest is this civil worker, and he's able to keep, and because they're dating, and Tandy touched him, and his intentions are true. He wants to marry the mother, and and he's actually a legitimate good boyfriend, and he's keeping records on Roxxon, the paper trail, to help the mother gain back any kind of like lawsuit.
Yeah, exactly.
So that was a point of him being there, and I thought that was really interesting, and how you could see how she's using her powers to developing and stuff. So
it was good.
In terms of ratings, how would you rate this film? Rate this series? Sorry.
I'd give it a 9. I like it.
I liked it. Yeah, quite a bit.
Maybe I would say maybe 8.5.
I would give this an 8.5 too, not a 9, because I'm not a fan of like teenage angst too much. That's just the teenage drama is a little too much for me. But this one in particularly, it was done because you needed to have that drama to explore what it is that's setting off, not set off, but like how it affects their powers.
Right.
To explain it more. And I thought overall it wasn't too bad, and I thought how do I say this? I don't think their powers are unique, because again, when you're starting off, you don't have control of what you're doing.
Right.
But it's quite interesting how their powers are manifest.
Right. Yeah,
so I just thought that was really cool.
Definitely.
Okay, and with that, you're right. I am Ray.
I'm Epi.
We'll see you next week. We ask you to hit subscribe on the YouTube channel and hit thumbs up and 4 stars, and subscribe to our or follow us on our not Facebook but on YouTube or on like Podbean and all the other, Apple Podcasts. We appreciate any and all kind of help we can get. The more we can get, the more shows we can do, and we appreciate any help or assistance. And leave comments. Please leave us comments if you want us to do or review something a little better or intense or something to cut out. So we listen to that too. We appreciate it. So with that, I am Ray.
And I'm Evie.
We'll talk to you next week.